what is the capability of this medicine then? If I just had that moment of instantaneous healing or the instantaneous, like realization that has changed my life, now I want to know what else it can do. The reasons that we fall into what we feel like are the safe, get a job and suck it up, it's a lot of it is in our trauma patterning and our wounding. And so if we don't actually get to the root of all this, it's not really truly healing anything. When I went in and faced it and dealt with it, and I did work outside of the ceremony with professionals that know what they're doing, and then work inside the ceremony, it is like my life has completely changed every time.
Okay. So hello and welcome back to our podcast, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. And I'm here today with Beth. And I'm so excited to talk to you, sister, because I know that you are quite a voice in the psychedelic space. I'm sure that a lot of people who listen to this podcast, listen to your podcast and all the things that you are doing. And I love to know, a little bit a personal story, how you got into the medicine, because normally people have this story, the medicine changed my life. And then I, went into this direction. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming. And how did you get into this whole medicine path?
So good to be here. It's funny. I was just interviewing Rick Doblin at Burning Man, out of all places. And afterwards, I don't even know how it came up. And I told him about my first acid trip, which was kind of a little accidental. And it was when I was 14 years old. And, I didn't really think anything of it. I grew up in California. I always say it's because I grew up in the Bay Area outside of San Francisco that a lot of these psychedelics were just kind of around. And it was like very out in the open almost. So I was given this hit of acid at 14, and the guy who gave it to me, I actually had a curfew. I had to be home at 10 p.m. I mean, I was 14 years old, and I was at a youth dance club. We used to go to these youth dances, like under 18, and they were really fun. And he gave me this, but it was like 30 minutes before my curfew. And I was like, well, I have to be home. Can I save it for later? And I'll never forget. He's like, no, you have to take it now. And so I did, and I didn't know what I was getting into. And that was kind of the beginning of the whole psychedelic path. But even at a younger age, I had some experiences that I, to this day, have no idea how to make sense out of them. They were probably, some kind of activations at a fairly young age. I actually recently found out that my Neptune placement is in a something like Neptune conjunct Sun and something else, which makes me very like attuned to certain things, I guess. But I'd had kind of non-ordinary state activations at a younger age and just kind of assumed they were normal for everybody. And I think once I did the psychedelic, like my first experience, and then of course kind of got into it after that. I do remember during that first trip, which I spent the whole time by myself laying in my bed in the quiet because my parents thought I was asleep. And, they were like right down the hall and there's nothing you can do about it. I remember going through that trip thinking, wow, there's so much that they're not telling us. There was that knowing of, wow, there's a lot of potential. Like if this little thing can create this in my mind right now, like, wow, what is the capability of our mind and our being? And so I just started exploring, and I got into, I was in the rave scene back then. And like this is the very early 90s, and got into, acid, MDMA. Well, it wasn't called MDMA. It was called ecstasy, mushrooms, all the different drugs and parties. And, I think the one thing I had noticed, it wasn't so much the drugs, it was like more of the dancing of being in that meditative state, that expanded state of consciousness of very present moment. I started to experience what people would call magic, and it wasn't just from the drugs. It was like the depths of connection and like feeling one another, and the heightened experience of spirituality, even at a rave. And that kind of brought me to want to understand it more. I actually studied psychology in college and was originally on the path to becoming a therapist. And when I got into the neuroscience and how the brain worked and all these chemicals with the, certain drugs, that was where I was really interested and excited. So I had just always been kind of a mind explorer, all throughout high school, college, and beyond that. Just kind of exploring that place of like, there's more to this than I realized. Like there must be more to the mind. And then every experience I had would just bring me to another place of like, wow. And then I started, I was always on a spiritual path, and I was studying and doing transformational programs at a very young age, and just reading books and getting into different, like Buddhism and meditation. And I was also always a very big athlete and a very big dancer, like partier, as I would call it, like going out dancing to raves and clubs and whatever. And I started actually making connections between all these different states, like going for a run, being at a dance party, being on a drug, going on a hike, and meditation, and putting all of them together and realizing they all kind of produce the same or similar effects, even without the drugs. How I got into ayahuasca was, I had gone through many different initiatory experiences and like had a lot of life transformation, pretty much nonstop my whole life. But I went through a lot of big experiences, like 29 years old, or around 30, my father died suddenly. That kind of opened up a whole nother level of my spiritual path, and went through job loss and took some time off to travel and question everything. And that was right before 2012. That was 2011. And I was definitely going through another level of like awakening. And, I had heard about this medicine because I think just being around the rave scene and spiritual scenes and growing up in California, I'd heard about, heard about certain things, and I had known about things like Burning Man. But I kind of just assumed it was all like, oh, that's for hippies. And I wasn't a hippie, And then the one thing I started hearing about ayahuasca pretty early on was like, oh, it's this drug that's really dark and gives you these crazy visions. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. That sounds terrible. But I had one friend that was like really interested in doing it and used to talk about going to Peru. And this was like way back then. And then around 2011, 12, I had made some major life changes, and I had been kind of taken a whole different career path. And along this path of stepping into entrepreneurship back then, I met one person, and I had really been dedicated to my own like meditation path and spiritual path. And, I had also still been doing drugs, like on and off throughout since 14 years old. And I had definitely experienced this kind of, certain spiritual activations and awakenings through, let's say, psilocybin or any of these medicines, really. But when I met this one friend back in, I think it was 2012, and I don't know how it even happened, it's very blurry, but I was really just given the ayahuasca, like, hey, here's the invitation to come drink this with one of the best people out there. It's like landed in my lap, and it's weird because I don't remember being like, I wasn't on a mission to find it. Like, I didn't even know it took place in America. I thought it was, only in Peru. And I just kind of said yes, and went by myself. This friend didn't even go with me. And I really went in with the intention of just doing this once. That was, I blatantly was like, I'm only doing this once. I'm never going to do this again. I don't know why. I just thought it would be enough to do it once. And there was nothing about it that really called me, other than just pure curiosity. And also, like, I was going through a huge transition time in my life when that came to me in 2012, 2013. And so that's when I drank it. And what's weird is when I look back on that first experience, I don't know if anything's by accident, really. For me, I did sit with someone who happens to be one of the best people on planet Earth. And I'm not just saying that. I've sat with a lot of people, and he's a master. He's a Peruvian man who's been doing this for 30 years, who, holds dietas and holds a very strict tradition and makes very, very powerful medicine on top of it. And he's actually known for that as well, for having very strong medicine. I didn't know this, I didn't know this anything. I just knew, like, okay, person recommended, go. It was definitely, to this day, probably the most powerful experience of my life. nothing. I've been on dietas. I've worked with 5-MeO and Bufo, and I've drank tons of ayahuasca since then. But that first time definitely took me to places that to this day, I think it was basically pulling me on my path. Like, why did it take me to these particular places when not everybody's taken there, especially the first time? It showed me a lot of concepts that ancient wisdom has been talking about for millennia. And when I was able to feel them and experience them at that level, it was like, oh, that's what the Buddha's been saying. Now I can feel it and understand it. I do have to say it was very hard to integrate that, though, because it was so powerful and so deep and so big, like a lot of collective, a lot of future predictions that have come through for a long time now, which supposedly has to do with my Neptune placement, by the way. I didn't know this. I assumed everybody got the exact same visions for years until I started comparing stories to friends of mine. And I'm like, oh, you don't see that? You don't have that experience? Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. And I think there's a lot of people that do have certain experiences, and then there's a lot of people that maybe have different kinds. And I don't know. I just know what I've had, and it's just been very powerful. And that just kept calling me back. Especially because, I had certain, I never use this. Like, I use it very sacredly, but like I had some of those miracle moments. And when I had the miracle moment, I was like, well, wait, it's kind of the same thing that happened at 14. I'm like, what is the capability of this medicine then? If I just had that moment of instantaneous, like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like that instantaneous healing, or the instantaneous forgiveness, or the instantaneous, like realization that has changed my life, then now I want to know what else it can do. So that's kind of how it got started. I know it's very long, but it's been over 33 years of my life.
Wow. Yeah, I can really relate to your story. I think that many people have a little bit similar path, entering into this world. And I particularly relate to that part when you were saying that this was another level. This was something, beyond what you experienced. And that was something that happened to me, that I did so many other things before, from practices to substances to everything. And I just felt that, wow, this is really like a different thing. And even up until today, I feel that this particular plant spirit can help us to access very deep places within us that with other tools is very difficult, or maybe even impossible to go there. And I think that was something that really, really attracted to me, because I am that kind of seeker as well.
Yeah.
So more than 10 years with the medicine, that's a long time, and for me, it's funny as well. It's my first dieta was in 2012 as well in Peru. I'm curious to know that over this decade, what were some takeaways that you can point out? This is something I really learned through my work with the medicine, some wisdom that we can share with our audience.
So many. Of course, I did a podcast episode back in, I think it was March or April. Yeah, it was like 100th episode celebration. I said, what have I learned from 33 years of psychedelics and plant medicines? The biggest is just really the power of the heart. I mean, it's super simple. It's even just to be reminded of that every time. It's like, oh yeah, here's the truth. Here's all I need, on some level. I do believe if every human being could kind of figure that out and wake up to that, like, I don't know, imagine what kind of world we would have. It's definitely not easy to live in that all the time, in this reality of the modern day world that especially us Westerners live in. But when I see the people I work with down in Peru and the way they live, like, they seem to have no problem. They live, at least the people I work with, live a much more simple life. They're not connected to their computers half the day. They're, not to glamorize it, because there's definitely it's not always glamorous, but yeah, they tend to be living a much more connected life that's, connected to spirit, connected to earth, connected to their own heart. So that's always the biggest one, like overarching theme is, what if you actually just listen to your heart, open it up and shine your light, and that's it, like that's all we're here to do. I teach purpose. That's a huge part of my work, is having people find their true purpose and live it authentically. And it's very hard for a lot of people to even know what it is that's in them and what's coming through. So that was another big thing that this is kind of how I created all my summits and my podcast and the work I do. I was already a business coach, and I was on the medicine path, and I didn't bring them together for many years. I kind of kept them into separate realms. But then I started noticing how much of my path was being informed by the medicine work. And I also noticed how many people I would do it with that would not integrate it. And they would go on dietas because, some of these people I've been on 4 dietas with. And then they'd go back to the same old, same old job that they hate, same old life that they hate, like the daily grind. And, I would not see much actually change in their life. And I started questioning, like, why are you doing this so much if nothing's changing? So for me, I would actually have these, experiences. And here's the thing, and I'm sure you say this too, it's not like I go and change my life the next day and like quit everything and sell my house and divorce whoever, not that, but like, if things started coming through that would wake me up and make me think differently, I would start to get curious and start to explore that and ask a lot of questions like, well, what if this was real? What if that could happen? And I had this one moment on my very first dieta. It was actually on my first dieta in the last ceremony, like almost towards the end too. It was just this vision that came through. And I was running a business, my previous business, but also going through a lot of like questions and transitions around that business. And this vision came through that it was kind of this funny vision of just me helping a bunch of my friends who, a lot of them were medicine people, and just having fun helping people like that. This vision, it was actually very specific. Like it was like me on this big grassy mountaintop that was just hopping around, like having fun, helping a bunch of cool people that I really liked. And that was it. And it didn't show me anything about money. It didn't show me anything about trying to make a living. It was always, and I've had these visions multiple times where it was always around like this feeling of, what would you be doing if money didn't even exist? And I say this to my clients all the time. Like if the whole entire financial system around the entire world totally collapsed and we were all in the same boat together, and I mean, I don't know if this is real, maybe one day in some kind of future. But what if there was no money as we know it? And what if it was just a different world where we're all pitching in and we're all just doing what we're here to do? Like, what would you do? And that's kind of what it showed me. It kept showing me like, what would help other people like reach more people? Because even if there was no such thing as making money, if I have a friend who's an herbal healer, or if I have a client who does life-changing astrology, or I have another client who helps you heal sexual trauma, those things are still going to be needed, whether people get paid to or not. Like it's part of the human experience. Like we want to expand and grow and learn about ourselves. So yes, that person's helping someone feel better, or that person's helping someone know who they are, or that other person's helping someone, like get past trauma so they can really shine their light and open their heart. If I can help more people to do that, then that's really what I'm here to do, whether there's money involved or not. At least that's what I'm here to do for now. Who knows about the future? I always believe in like being in the present moment. So that has come through multiple times. And that's actually, I think, why then the vision started changing after I started getting it and was like, understanding this truth. I started getting these messages around speaking publicly about this integration of medicine and your true path, whether you call it a business or your career or making money or the work you do in the world or soul's work. It's all kind of intertwined, right? Because what I started noticing was a lot of people, their depression, their anxiety, their their angst in their world, the issues that they're dealing with, a lot of it, at least here in the US or in a lot of Western countries, seems to be rooted in working at jobs people hate, or not liking their work, or being part of a rat race that they don't want to be a part of. It's like this misalignment. And a lot of us, at least my generation, a lot of us were programmed to believe like, okay, the only way is you have to go get a job, work for other people and suck it up, and then you make money and then you die. And I started questioning this at a very young age. And so what I started seeing was like, okay, if I'm able to take steps, and other people that I'm friends with are successful entrepreneurs, and other people are happy doing what they do and making money, then why can't everybody make money and be happy at the same time? Like, I do believe it's possible. So through the medicine, it was a few years it came through that was actually very specifically telling me to do a summit on this, because I was already doing other summits. And I was like, no way. I actually said no for like 2.5 years. I was like, I'm not talking about this publicly. You've got to be kidding me. It was giving me very specific instructions, and I just kept saying no. I was like, this is illegal. I'm going to be disowned by all my friends and community. This is going to get people in trouble. It's going to get me in trouble. I don't, what are people going to think? No one even wants to hear about this. Like, I actually thought there'd be 50 people. That was the number. I don't know why. I was like, oh, maybe there's like 50 people that are curious about the intersection of psychedelics and having purpose and like creating a business. And then, it kind of got to the point where it was like, you either do it or you don't, because it was like coming through over and over and over and over and over. And so I started getting curious, and I brought it up in a business coaching mastermind that I was in. And I brought it up, and I was like, I keep having these visions coming through. I don't know what to do about it. They're kind of getting annoying because it's been coming through for a couple of years now. And when I said it to this group of people and my business coach, everybody was like, you have to do this. That's your authenticity. This is who you are. You've been hiding it from the world for all these years. And they're like, do it. You only know if you're going to succeed if you try. You're never going to know if you don't try. So then I went through a really deep process it took me about 6 months of like deep somatic therapy and like discussing. I even discussed it with my shaman. I discussed it with people I was on dieta with. I wanted to get his blessing. I wanted to get other people's blessings. And, the irony is, when I started telling these other people about what I was thinking of doing, I had like 5 people. One was like, oh, that's amazing, because I'm about to write a book. Another one's like, I'm coming out with a whole album called Music for Mushrooms. And that's my friend East Forest. Then there was someone else that's like, oh, that's great, because I'm going to start doing my own, medicine sessions. Someone else is like, oh, I'm starting an integration coaching business. So it was like, and this was 2018 when I finally was like, okay, I'll do it in next fall, 2019. And that's kind of what led to that. And then it's been like a whole other opening ever since then. So those are some kind of big things. Of course, there's huge collective things that have come through, but that's a whole other story. There's a lot of those too.
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you for sharing this. I really resonate with that part of, ayahuasca helping us to step on that higher path and to align with that life purpose. And I do agree with you that a lot of the misery, I think, is because people are not on their path. And therefore, they don't like their life, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, there is a huge amount of conditioning, as you said, to be on a certain path and not to follow your own path. So I want to just circle back to what you started with, the power of the heart and follow your heart. And I want to just talk a few minutes more about this, because I think even just the concept of this is alien for a lot of people. When you say follow your intuitive guidance, is like, what the heck is that? Or, so yeah, can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is it's, so many people are either programmed or living from a state of woundedness. It's all intertwined, right? Like, honestly, a lot of the reasons that we fall into what we feel like are the safe, get a job and suck it up. It's a lot of it is in our trauma patterning and our wounding. And so if we don't actually get to the root of all this, then it's not really truly healing anything. And this is actually something I've talked about a lot on my own podcast, on other podcasts around, the media and the larger collective seems to be saying, oh, psychedelics will heal all your depression and anxiety. And it's like, okay, yeah, they make you maybe feel better, but if you're not able to actually go into the root of what's causing the depression, the anxiety, the trauma, they're just going to keep repeating on some level, or they're never really going to be truly healed. They're just going to be masked with, microdosing, or masked by going to a ceremony after ceremony, which, by the way, I also saw that in many communities where people would it was like the new drug. And it's like, well, if you're going to drink ayahuasca once a month just to mask your feelings instead of actually getting to the depths of what's really causing the problem, then how is that different than drinking a bottle of booze or taking antidepressants? It's not really the key. Thankfully, medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin, they tend to bring stuff to the surface, whether you like it or not. And yes, you can run and avoid it. I know, because I have done that many times, but there's going to be a point where it's your soul wants you to look at this. That's how I feel. So, the deeper place is to actually do that work that can be very hard. And we all know this. This is why it's important to have someone like Nina or one of my clients, work with an integration coach, work with someone who understands trauma patterning or, wounding patterns, or the energetics of how, I can talk forever about this, but the somatics and the energetics and how they're stored in the body from not just this lifetime, but multiple generations. And we could go on and on, right? I do believe in past lives. I have dealt with that. I've had to battle past life things in ceremonies, which I didn't even used to believe were real. I thought that was a complete total crock. And then I actually started to experience it. And you know what? When I went in and faced it and dealt with it, and I did work outside of the ceremony with professionals that know what they're doing, and then work inside the ceremony, it is my life has completely changed every time. And that's the real healing. And I think, to really get to the depths of opening your heart, it's going to take some of that depths of seeing what's in there, blocking the heart. Yes, there is a point where every human being has it available and accessible to them to just tap into their intuition every moment. That to me is very simple. I know for some people it seems hard, but usually it's because you're running too fast. Most human beings don't leave space to slow down, get onto the earth, or go meditate, or at least just take literally 5 minutes. That's how I got started. 5 minutes to just sit quietly every day. That's it. You don't have to get it right. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I think in our fast-paced Western world, we're just, going, including me. I came on this podcast. I'm like, oh my God, I've been working 3 days straight. But I always leave that space. To me, that's a non-negotiable. It's I always spend some time outside, or some time in meditation, some time in conscious something movement. But I think in our modern day society, so many people are just going and going and going. And then our mind, it's the mind in the way all the time. And if you don't actually have that, that spaciousness to really feel your body and feel your intuition and feel what is it that I am feeling? What's coming through me? What do I really want? What is my truth? And it's all the same, right? It's intuition, your truth, your heart, the inner compass and the inner guidance. For people to say, I don't have an intuition, it's well, everybody has this accessible. It's just a matter of do you even give it a chance? Do you give it any space? But, and then the open the heart thing, it's a process. I still wonder, I'm there's moments where I know for a fact my heart is wide open. And there's moments where I know it's shuts back down a little and opens and shuts back down. We're humans, right? I say I only have, there's 3 people I know who might have a fully open heart 24/7. And that's pretty much it. But then if we can actually just like chip away at it a little bit and start to really tune in, that's the process, and just finding that inner self-love and self-compassion, but really to listen deeply to your soul. Because I do believe there is, whatever word we want to use, it doesn't really matter, but there's something else here that's guiding you. You just have to really like give it space to be shown the guidance, and then actually like, maybe consider getting curious around listening to the guidance. I mean, I always say, look, it's not about just listen to your guidance and that's it. If you're new to this, what about like just getting curious and having fun? Like my dieta vision, when I saw that one vision of like me prancing on this beautiful field, I came out of that and I was like, what if I just played with that? And I actually had also just read the surrender experiment. And I was like, what if I just did a surrender experiment and like got curious around that? And I'm telling you, that's when everything just kind of took off on its own. I don't even remember like doing anything. It just kind of, my business just kind of started without even trying. And that's where, I see this all the time with my clients. I see this all the time where if you really just like start developing a relationship with that part of yourself or with your soul, whatever you want to call it, that part of your heart that's like knows something and you're not listening to it. But if you just start to like get in touch with it, become its friend and like see what happens, that's where miracles start to happen. And I've seen this over and over and over and over, like even to the point where I've had, I have one story about a client who like made $10,000 out of the blue without doing a thing for months and months and months, like wasn't even on the internet. And it just like landed in her lap. I have those stories with my clients all the time. Like even to the point where people are like, I don't even understand how I got here, which is kind of what happened to me. I'm like, wait, how am I doing this? I don't even remember. This was never my intention. I never went out and said, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a business coach. I was like, what is that? It just started happening to me. But that's what happens when you leave that space and start to get curious and open up and start to work with spirit on a different level. It's like, I hate saying it, but there is a point where like, manifestation, it's like, it's very real, like.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really delighted because we are always making this point on this podcast that the work outside of the ceremony is just as much important as the work that you do in the sacred ceremonial space, or maybe even more, and raising awareness around this, I think, is one of the most important that we both want to do. But I also admire you because you're bringing this topic of money and business into this space. And I think that it's so needed because in general, in the spiritual community, there is this judgment and everything on money. And we have a horrible relationship with money. And that's part of our healing and awakening to align that and to put that.
Oh my God. Well,
way. So what kind of offerings do you have that you have people to do that?
Yeah. And I do want to just say, because it's funny. Every year I launch my summit, which is live right now. There's always a couple haters. And here's the thing. It's like 2 or 3 people out of 7,000 people, it's not the majority. But there's always someone that gets all up in arms over money or business. But then I'm always saying, like, look, unless you're born into an uber wealthy family, or you are quite literally living off the land, which, by the way, all the indigenous communities I've spent time in, they do not live off the land. There's a glorification of what's really happening in a lot of indigenous communities. They're literally still paying for gas. They drive scooters, they still have to buy things at the store. They are not weaving all their clothes from scratch. Money right now, 2023, is part of our reality. And we cannot spiritually bypass the fact that money exists and working exists. And so for all those people that are like, oh my God, how can you talk about money? It's like, okay, yeah, I would love all healing to be absolutely free, but I would also love all food to be absolutely free, and housing to be free, and every single thing on the planet to be free. I cannot wait. I hope to God this happens in our lifetime, that there is a full gift economy that exists. I don't know. I doubt it. Maybe I think it's sometime going to come back around. But until that point, I believe that we can't put on our blinders and pretend that it doesn't exist, because that is actually a form of spiritual bypass. It's like, okay, all of us have no problem talking about trauma and abuse and, stress and anxiety and PTSD, darkness, violence, rape, racism, sexism. I could go on and on. But for some reason, money is like so taboo to people. And I'm like, okay. And then here's the best part is the people that criticize anybody out there, because I'm not the only one that talks about business, making money, helping people. And honestly, I rarely ever talk about the money piece, because it's never about the money. It's about being of service. But the people that are of service in the world, I always say, look, like, how are you supported? If you want to shun all money, like, how do you pay your bills? How do you live? How do you afford to keep a roof over your head? A couple people, someone I met a few months ago was like, I give all my mushroom sessions for free. What he doesn't say is that he actually like sold a business for, whatever it was, a few $1 million a few years before. And I'm like, well, yeah, if I was sitting on millions of dollars too, I would probably give a lot out for free. And here's the thing, I'm not sitting on $1 million and I still give a ton out for free. So it's all about bringing it into balance and reciprocity and building it into the business. So this is what I teach to my clients inside of all my programs, which is how to build a business that actually supports you, meaning financially, spiritually, energetically, emotionally, like physically on all levels, like a sustainable business that feels really good and lets you have a thriving life. And there's a way to build it where you're still actually accommodating everybody at all levels. Like I come from this Buddhist background where it's called Dana, where it's like donation based. I don't even ask for donations for my free items. I would say almost like 90% of what I do or 80% of what I do is actually free. Then 20-ish% of what I offer out there is paid, And then when someone says like, oh, you're all about the money, I'm like, really? Do you realize like how much of my own money, time, and energy is spent just gifting out free coaching, free content, free summits, free podcasts, free services, like constantly. I do free coaching sessions. I'll probably do one in October or November. I do free business coaching constantly. So, if you follow my emails, you'll find out about them. But that's where it's like, so I do believe in trying to just get this into balance, like everything else in our world that we're really trying to get into balance. It's not about shunning it and pretending that it doesn't exist, which by the way, means that it's going to keep persisting. We have to actually, it's like shadow work, right? Like, yeah, I think on some level, we all agree that the system is super messed up, right? Like, I don't love the way capitalism runs. It's not ideal. I don't think it's serving the planet or most people. And I think everybody's aware on some level that it's a broken system, but until we fix it, we can't, it's the shadow. We have to bring it to the light. And there is a way to approach it from this place of like a different energy of bringing, like, I learned this from some of my own teachers, like money as love, money as service, money as really, it is just another agreement we all agree on. So how do we actually see this differently? And that's what I'm all about, is like the perspective. And when you start to actually shift your own inner perspective around work, money, business, making money, if you can actually like, I've actually done some episodes on like healing money wounds. Like if you come into a better relationship with yourself and money and like being of service in the world, and start to realize that your service is actually not connected to your money. But if you just show up in service without any attachment to whether you're going to get clients or make money or become rich or whatever it is you want, what happens is, the non-attachment, it starts to actually just come in more and more from all different places. Meaning, I don't see my business as the means to make money. What I see is like, I'm here to just do this work out there. That's it. I'm just, every day I'm like, guide me, tell me what to do, use me as a vessel. And if I'm doing that and I just keep doing that and I keep showing up, then somehow I'm supported one way or another, whether it's through clients or through some other opportunities or through a gift or God knows what, or random money that lands in the mail. it's like we can't connect these two. So I teach this to my clients. And the irony is what happens is when you're just connected to your soul's path of being, like living your truth, being guided by your heart, somehow you are supported. I've seen this over and over and over and over. And if you're not supported, your soul is always moving you into alignment to be supported, or it wants you to learn a really hard lesson to then learn how to be supported, but a lot of it is really deep work around our mindset, our relationship, our perspectives, and like really doing this deep, it's like a major trauma in our society is around money. So this is actually something, I've actually interviewed some other people about this, something you can do within the medicine space, which I have actually done myself because I had such deep generational trauma around scarcity and money that it was actually affecting my entire nervous system. And when I started doing that, along with integration, along with somatic therapy, along with energy work, along with daily practices, everything in my reality just started to change. And I actually integrate this in all my business coaching programs because it's so interconnected together. Every one of my clients, doesn't matter if it's a client that comes from corporate and is already making six figures, or a client who's a healer who's just getting started and, trying to make ends meet. Everybody's still dealing with some kind of money trauma, whether they, know it or not. And the people that don't have that trauma, they just seem to bring in more money. In my personal opinion, I do believe on some level, this is kind of why we see this imbalance in our world where there's a lot of uber wealthy people that could actually pay for an entire country to live. Well, I don't know. Why is it that there's such, a lot of it's systemic and this is what we need to fix. But I think a lot of it really is like perception, mindset, and healing like wounds and depths of intergenerational trauma around scarcity versus abundance.
I totally agree. And myself, coming from a communist country, growing up and coming into entrepreneurship, it was quite, a process. And it's still, I'm a humble student. So yeah, where can people find you, Beth, if they want to work with you?
Thank you so much. So I am at BethAWeinstein.com. I'm also Instagram, Facebook. I have a Facebook group. I'm all over the internet. Beth A. Weinstein. I have a podcast called Medicine for These Times, The Psychedelic Entrepreneur. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm interconnected to Nina. So, I'm a pretty open book. And yeah, my group mastermind is open for the 2024 year. It's an incredible group of people that are on very similar paths, a lot of, newer to early stage, or even completely, totally new, never done this before, coaches, healers, psychedelic pioneers, people, integration coaches, people working in this space, or, just a lot of medicine people who want to work with a business coach that really understands their own path. For example, I have 2 clients on dietas right now in Peru, and I think it's just so amazing to have a community and a mastermind where then they can both come back and they're in separate places and they can relate to one another. So it's a really amazing community that's open. I also do private coaching, and I have a shorter program that's launching probably in February or March as well. So feel free to reach out to me there.
Exciting. Yeah, thank you so much. And for our listeners, also check out our first Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy facilitator training. So if you want to become a professional integration facilitator and you specifically want to work with the Mother Ayahuasca, this can be just the right training for you. So check out the link and our early bird. And also we're going to share all of the link for Beth and the summit as well, because even after the summit, people can watch the episodes, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's so perfect.
Well, the way it works is it ends around September 29th, 30th, but you can also purchase it. There's an upgrade where you can watch unlimited. And then usually what we do, if you sign up, we still give a couple of the interviews out for free. So,
that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything you do, and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and leave a comment if you enjoyed this episode.
Help us grow our community by sharing this episode with your friends and subscribe to our channel to receive the latest on Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. To embark on your healing journey or to start a new career in psychedelic assisted therapy, go to my website, avatarhealingarts.com, and get in touch. And of course, stay tuned for the next episode.